This is Sean Lee, and you're listening to KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara, and worldwide at kpfk.org.
Welcome to La Raza Radio, Radio for la Raza, La Causa, Radio para la Gente, Radio for the People. We at La Raza Radio are here to raise the voices of the pueblo and forward an analysis rarely heard on the airwaves. We draw our understanding from the study of history and economics and our sense of direction from the demands of the people and the movement. Join us for an hour of insight, strength, and dignity. Join us for an hour of Chicano.
Power.
Chicana.
Power.
Chicanx.
Power.
Welcome to La Raza Radio.
We're joined now by Deanna Araceli, an Afro-Indigenous educator, poet, multidisciplinary artist, and entrepreneur who is dedicated to the spiritual education of all people. She's lived in Mexico, Ecuador, and spent extensive time in India. She specializes in Bhakti yoga, yoga of the heart, Jyotish, the Vedic astrology, shadow work, and soul retrieval practices. Her aspiration is for others to unlock the key to their own spiritual potential and bring healing on multiple levels. Deanna is the founder of La Casa de Luz, a home of divination and spiritual school. She engages in public and private ceremonies rooted in her indigenous lineage, with her signature course being the Mysterium. She guides healers and artists to integrate their shadow selves to be greater service to their communities. She recently self-published her first book of poetry, Walking Piece of Art, Poetry with Healing. As a lover of the matriarchy and a proud femme, she curates blogs dedicated to revival history at the underground realms. Deanna continues to experiment with different mediums. As a musician, Didara. Her EPs, Summer Colors, and The Lost Files are available on all streaming platforms. Deanna, so thank you. So grateful to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Matt. I'm really, really grateful for you and this opportunity to share.
Yeah, so Deanna, I really want to get into this La Casa Luz and your signature course, Mysterium, as well as the music project you have. But first, for our listeners, can you give us a little background into these extensive travels? I think they might be very interested in hearing about that. You spent some time in Ecuador. Where in Ecuador? And what was
I've been traveling since I was little. My mom, being a hardworking Mexicana, she basically started to ship me to my family during the summers or holidays where I had extensive period off. And so I had that travel bug as a little child. And then when I was in college, it was really important for me to continue traveling, to continue to open myself up to new horizons. So after college, I went to India for 6 months. And from there, I moved to Ecuador, Quito. I was there for 1 year teaching English and also just living a really beautiful, peaceful life there. I really loved Ecuador. And then I did India again. And then I went to Mexico. I lived in Mexico for over a year in 2016. And then I went back to India for another 3 months. And then came back to California, had a little revival here. But once the pandemic happened, I went straight back to Mexico as I found that it was easier to build community. But now I'm here in California and trying to get rooted so I can do more travels in the future, but a little bit more sustainably.
So I really want to get into the the projects you're working on right now. But I'm very curious. What is Quito like? I've never been.
Oh man, Quito, it's the city in mountains. So it is just forever spring there. That's what they say. It's right on the equator. That's what Ecuador means, right? Equator. And so basically the fruits, the vegetables, it's going all season long. Ecuador right now is it's been for over a decade or more under the dollar. And so the dollar goes really far there. So when I was living there in 2013, 2014, you can get a bag of aguacates for $1 for 5 huge avocados. So it's just a place of abundance. And the only way that you know when the seasons change, for example, summer, is it rains less. But in all reality, it rains almost every single day around noon to 2 p.m. And so it's it's just a very beautiful place. I definitely highly recommend going to Ecuador.
Now, so you were teaching there. Now, you also spent extensive time in India. So where in India were you? And can you tell us a little about those experiences? Where were you traveling at that point in time?
Yeah, so I have teachers in India that are basically about a couple hours outside of Delhi in a place called Vrindavan. And Vrindavan is really known for being the home of Krishna. So I have spent extensive time in Vrindavan, living in the ashram, learning from my teachers, my different gurus, as we say, spiritual masters, and as well as places like Calcutta. I've been in West Bengal, which we would say Navadvip or Mayapur. I've been to Orisha, which is a little bit more coastal. There's a place called Puri that's there called Jagannath Puri. I've also been to the north, Rishikesh. I recently was there in last year, and I did a yoga teacher training in the hills of Rishikesh, as it was canceled for me during the pandemic, so I was able to go back. I have not gone to the south yet. But hopefully in the future, I'll be able to go down south. But for the most part, I'm mostly in that central west or northern areas.
And of course, I'm very interested in your travels in Mexico. So, like, originally when you used to go to Mexico, where were you? Where were you as a child, and then like later on as an adult, where would you find yourself?
So Mexico is very special to me. My mother is Mexicana. She's born in a little town called El Ocotito, which is found in the mountains of Guerrero. And so I didn't have the pleasure of going there when I was younger, but I did have the ability to go there around 2016 when I was living in Mexico City. So I basically have lived in Mexico City. I've lived also in the north in a place called Ciudad Victoria, Tamaulipas. It's a very dangerous area, but it's very interesting. There's a whole yoga vegetarian community in Ciudad Victoria. Shout out to my friends there. And I've also lived recently, I've spent 2 years in the coast of Nayarit, about an hour away from Puerto Vallarta, outside of a town that's very well known called Sayulita, as well as closer to San Pancho. What was interesting, I'll just say this, is that what you see in Mexico happening a lot, being a double citizen, being, part of that land, we're seeing a lot of changes in Mexico, especially in these coastal areas where they're basically becoming gentrified. So it kind of made me feel uncomfortable as I was living there for a few years. I was definitely dedicated to doing ceremonies, temazcales. We were helping retreats out. But there became a disconnect. So I decided to kind of stop my time in Mexico. And then, when I go back, hopefully have a better plan on, again, coming back to that sustainability.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm very interested. So this is a good transition into talking about your practices as like a healing artist. So how have your travels in India and Mexico and broadly across the world, how have those informed, and the teachers that you've had, how has that informed your practice as a kind of as a healer?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think my travels, because I've had the travel bug and I've been a traveler for so long, it's been a part of my identity. There's a word called sojourner, and it's just someone who really finds home in multiple places, right? Like having a nomadic living. And I think when you dedicate your life to traveling, or at least at a period of your life, it opens you up to so many different things. You start to see different types of living, right? Living situations, being in third world countries, developing countries, and then also being born in the United States. We see so much privileges that we have here and like the overconsumption. So when I started to travel, especially to India, it just made me become more simple. And I really, there's a saying that we have in the yoga philosophy that it's like, simple living, high thinking. And so I really adopted that. So to me, the most important thing that I really gained from my travels is resourcefulness, as well as honoring the cultures and the lineages that we see being practiced. For example, yoga is something we see all over the United States now. Who's really practicing yoga? It's not just a physical thing. It's actually a connection with the heart. And that's why I've kind of dedicated myself to the practice and the path of bhakti yoga, which means devotional service. And, it's been 13 years since I've been following bhakti yoga. And what I have seen is that that's what matters. Service to the community. We're all doing service, either to our families, to our nations, to our selfish desires. but how do we become selfless and be able to help those who are in need? And so that definitely was sparked as I traveled through different situations, different circumstances. And it kind of led me to just being very open-minded and as well as open-hearted to help those that I feel, or even talk about it, just share, what you see around the world, because I think we're in a little bubble here in the United States. We don't really see the reality of so many people around us. And so that is very important, as well as, like I said, honoring the lineages and the cultures that we get our information from. So I am very big on ancient sciences and giving them the platform as an actual science that we can, hypothesize, experiment, and then come to certain conclusions by keeping that lineage. So that's very important, and something that I hold really truly, and it's one of my missions.
Can you expand upon this, what you mentioned earlier about simple living? How thinking like, what is the relationship between simple living and
especially for philosophers, I feel I'm a philosopher, and in many different ways. And I think when we start to understand that we don't need so many things, right? Again, we come from the United States, where it feels like our value is equal to our consumption. And so when we say simple living, we're saying take what you need, right? Live in harmony with the world. You don't need more technology. You don't need the newest iPhone, right? It's like, if your phones or if your living situation is fine as it is, why don't we start to expand, not externally, but internally? And so the more we can simplify our external realities, the higher our consciousness can go as far as our spirits, right? Our soul, our consciousness within. So does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. In my experience, like, you either have a very, very complicated, chaotic life, or productive one. I mean, and so you can't have both. So, I mean, yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think I'd probably take the conversation in a different direction, start talking about my own experience in life with that. But I completely agree with keeping elements of your life as simple as possible. So I'm really interested also, though, you're back in California now, and you have founded La Casa de Luz. Now, did you found that while you were away, or did you found that here? And what are some of the projects you have going with Casa de Luz?
Thank you. So basically, La Casa de Luz was born in 2020. I was living here. Actually, it was more like 2019. I had gone through a big illness in my life. And because of so many travels and learning how to deal with health issues and learning how to heal myself, it took me to kind of a darker space where I had to just kind of look in the mirror and say, like, who am I? And okay, I've been doing all of this searching and exploring, but who am I and what is my service to humanity? What's my dharma or my duty? And so I started to just kind of lock myself in a room and started doing more divination. So I practice a lot of like tarot, oracle, I Ching, these different type of cultural ways of divining. And that is kind of what took me to La Casa de Luz. It was born through a beautiful day. I was doing like a sound bath. I had like a healing session, and I just heard the name La Casa de Luz being whispered to me. And I said, okay, that's it. But I didn't know exactly how it was all going to unfold. My idea was that I would have a metaphysical shop with a studio for community classes, workshops in East LA. But with the pandemic, it just changed everything for me. And then I also realized, like, I didn't want to be in a big city. So that's why I went back to Mexico. And in Mexico, it was easier for me to kind of make the building blocks. Like, I wanted to do classes, workshops. And then it kind of led me to my course, the Mysterium. And then I came back last year, actually after one of my teachers, Matsuji, passed away in late 2022. It kind of triggered something within me. And that's where I was able to write down my syllabus because I'm a teacher. I've been teaching since I was 17 years old. So I knew I wanted to make some type of school. So that's what La Casa de Luz is. It's a home of divination. I'm an oracle. I give guidance through, divining by connecting with source, by channeling, as well as I give, spiritual education through historical ways of understanding curanderismo, of understanding the Vedic sciences like Jyotish, you mentioned, Vedic astrology, or Ayurveda, and these different things, also different cultural dances. So that's kind of La Casa de Luz now. And I definitely have big plans for La Casa de Luz, but it's more of an entity outside of myself. So I kind of am just like that vessel that kind of allows La Casa de Luz to expand. But yeah, so we have workshops, classes that we do in person, online, and then of course the Mysterium, which is an 8-week journey that I take, 8 to 16 week, depending on if it's a mentorship. But we dive deeper into the underworld and we kind of take that Eastern and indigenous processes, the shamanic ways to kind of unlock what's going on in our subconscious mind. Because again, especially in the United States and in Northern America, we're just kind of in this loop or in this spiral that doesn't allow us to really find liberation here and now.
So, in addition to being you're working within the healing arts, you're also a writer as well as a musician. And so, I'm curious before we get into talking about your writing and your music, how does your training and background in more of these healing arts, how does that inform your work as a writer and musician?
Yeah, it's so connected. I feel that my healing work has made my writing more impactful, not just for others, but for myself. So my journey with writing really started when I was young. I think I very quickly understood that I didn't like to paint and color and do those things that normal children would do. But I like to storytell and I like to make up stories. And so that was something that I've always had within me, but not until I was living in Mexico and in Mexico City is when I actually saw writing and poetry as an art. I was making poems. I was writing things, journaling so much. I mean, I had tons and tons of journals growing up. But I didn't realize this is my artistry. And so now that I am more mature and I can see everything I've gone through, it's definitely a part of everything. So I talk a lot about healing in my poetry, especially, as an activist as well. Like I use my writing, my music as activism. And so you will hear my lyrics, talking about vegetarianism or the different things that we see happening in our society, as well as my poetry. I want to write more even about just the different things that we see. And with Underground Realms, you mentioned as well, is my matriarchal blog. And so I talk a lot about taboo cultures and matriarchal societies. And again, I think by bringing up these forgotten stories or for talking about her story in different ways, it kind of heals the collective. It heals the society that has been disconnected from our lineages, our cultures, and most importantly, the earth.
So tell us, how did this, tell us a little about your book. How did it come together? Remind us of the title.
Yes. So Walking Piece of Art, Poetry for Healing is a compilation of 30 different poems I actually wrote while living in Mexico City in 2016. And it was like an idea of a zine. I kind of started compiling it and I just kept finding blockages. And so I put it to the side and I started to work a little bit more on, a future project. We'll see maybe in the next couple of years, Underground Realms, Matriarchy Now, which takes my blogs and kind of puts them in a historical thing. But what happened is I started finding blocks with that project and a little whisper told me, go back to the other. And I actually had a different title. And it didn't have a cover. I didn't have illustrations, but I knew this project needs to finish. I need to do something small. It's self-published. So I need to learn the ins and out of the industry. I'm still learning a lot about the book industry, and printing and marketing and things like that. But yeah, this is a piece of mine that explores certain traumas that I had with the masculine growing up and the different relationships I had, as well as finding that solace in spirituality, in my connection with Great Spirit, with Great Mystery. We can call him Krishna, Allah, Buddha. I just started to feel wholeness. So yeah, that walking piece of art is very special to me because it's kind of like a journey on how I healed my trauma, especially the sexual trauma that I've gone through. So it's special to me. And just a shout out to Louise Andralia, who did the cover, and Aaron Masarjian, who did the illustrations for me. They really both captured my vision completely and made this book possible.
I mean, it's a very beautiful book. It's a very, I happen to have a copy. It's a innocent, beautiful looking book. It's incredible. So Deanna, last question. So where can people connect to your work, and where can people find all the wonderful things you're doing as a healer, as an artist, as a musician? Where can people find you out there?
Yes, of course. So my website is La Casa de Luz 108, lacasadeluz108.com. And that same La Casa de Luz 108 can be found on Instagram, as well as my personal social media account is at DAYADHARADD. That's Daya Dhara DD. And you mentioned my musician name. That is D.Dhara with an H, DHARA. And you can find my music on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. I also have an energy letter that I come out with basically once a month that gives Vedic astrology transits as well as upcoming events. So if you'd like to connect with me deeper, please do sign up for my energy letter. And again, my website is lacasadeluz108.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. Many blessings.